Thanks, everyone. I wasn't supposed to be moderating this panel. I was supposed to be a panelist, so I'm going to ask you guys to be a little kind to me and forgive my note cards. Welcome. We are going to be talking about standing up for tech today, and I think it's an important topic to everybody in this room. I think it's quite easy to note that everybody enjoys the upside, but when it comes to seeing the support that's necessary for entrepreneurs, ones that are actually building this stuff, it feels like we're often someone else's problem. So instead of creating space and providing the missing rung on the funding ladder we desperately need, we see regulation that chokes progress and, possibly worse, tech hoarded and sometimes even weaponized. And what happens to industry when it has innovation stifled? Well, we can look at some of the long-standing traditional industries like in maritime, which is the backbone of global trade, a $2.2 trillion industry that still operates on handshakes and paper trails and antiquated systems. And why does this matter to you? Well, because what we end up with is inefficiencies. We end up with perverse incentives unchecked that lead to shortages and higher costs. The planet suffers, and we create a system of mistrust where misinformation thrives and capital gets mismanaged. And this isn't maritime. It's a perfect illustration of what happens when technology is blocked from driving progress. And that's what we're here to talk about, is how we can change that, because the potential of digital assets and blockchain has barely scratched the surface. So I'm going to move now to our very first question for the panelists, which is, given the current regulatory hurdles we see in Europe, but not only, and slow market adoption in the blockchain space, what role can individuals, communities, organizations, and leaders play to foster healthier regulation needed to create a tech-driven investment landscape?
Great. Thank you, Emma. Just a quick intro before I jump into the answer. My name is Michela. I work at the biggest exchange in the world, leading the institutional side, our corporate partnerships. It's what I have seen is lately, as you mentioned, Emma, the way we are driving changes is still very ancient, even in the crypto space. Entrepreneurs have limited access to those tables where decisions are being taken. That's why corporations and the biggest corporations in the space, we need to keep advocating for those companies, for those small companies and entrepreneurs, communicating and sitting in the same tables with regulators. One thing that I have seen from an exchange point of view is that communication with regulators are key. Not only in the company that I represent, but also some of my counterparties. They focus a lot on, or at least this year, in enhancing that communication. I'm meeting constantly with them, just making sure that they hear this side of the ecosystem. Another thing that we do have the responsibility of is just creating the right standards. Not only companies like Binance, Coinbase, Crypto.com, we have a responsibility to create the standards that the rest of entrepreneurs in the space will follow. And lastly but not least, one responsibility that we have is keep supporting them at the initial stage of the journey. Binance specifically has Binance Labs, which is an investment arm, where we do support entrepreneurs at this first stage, giving them with initial investment that they need to ramp up from there. Those are personally my views on how can the big corporations and big exchanges help the ecosystem and help those entrepreneurs jumping into the space.
So I'll jump in, quick introduction also. So my name is Marc Faubeau. I'm Business Development Director for Jacobi Asset Management. But I'm also involved in tokenization of private debt and tokenization of real estate, some projects also on the side. My background is trading, so I come from investment banking. I was trading fixed income for quite a few years and did algorithmic trading. So I come from two different, I see the market right now from two different angles. The first one is traditional finance and where we're going with, adoption of the tech, but also as an entrepreneur, is also what we can do to make sure that whatever we create is sustainable and brings the right changes for the different industries we're growing into. When it comes to traditional finance, especially with ETFs, which is the main product that we issued at Jacobi Asset Management, there are a few things that have to happen for traditional finance to start adopting those products. The regulatory landscape has to evolve, and that goes through communication, like Michela just mentioned, spending time with regulators, because the tech will always move faster than the regulation. So a lot of hand-holding, because we understand also that the FCA has other priorities than working on cryptocurrency and blockchain as a whole. There's a lot of things that they have to look at. So the more we make it easier for them to understand and we show good behavior, the better it is, and the more they will put that on their priority list. The second, which is a bit more from my, a mix actually from Jacobi Asset Management, who brings an ETF, which is a legally traditional finance wrapper, with underlying asset, which is crypto. But then from my entrepreneur standpoint, bringing tokenization to private debt, the idea for me is not to talk about blockchain when I'm going to sell this product, this platform that I'm building right now. So the message here is we are in a little bubble right now. We're living in our crypto bubble. We talk crypto, we live crypto, we sleep crypto, but most of the people out there, they've got no clue about blockchain. They still, I was with a friend the other day and she was like, she's working in finance too. And she's like, oh, but blockchain, is that still a thing? I'm like, well, yeah, it's still a thing actually, and it's growing. So that's something we have to realize. We're not gonna go from Web 2 to Web 3. We have to go through this Web 2.5. So hybrid products, hybrid marketing, hybrid everything. Just understand that if your product is here to solve an issue in a traditional industry, you will not succeed to sell it by over-complexifying your marketing with lingo, blockchain, and seed phrases and all this stuff. They're not going to buy it. So we have to tune down a little bit if you want more adoption, and that's something as a community that we really have to do and we have to be better at, because saying we know about blockchain and we know about smart contracts and all this stuff became a buzzword for a lot of family offices or people in traditional finance who could come and invest in your company or in your product.
Hi, I'm Alan Boyd, and you get that feeling of deja vu. I think this is the third time in my life where I've gone through major industry changes and everybody says, well, what about the regulations and everything? And don't worry about the regulations. I'm writing a business plan right now, or I've finished writing the plan, to introduce the world's first blockchain-based stock exchange, exclusively blockchain-based, which will also be global. It will not be inside a single jurisdiction. And we started thinking about this, and we realized that if we look at traditional stock exchanges, for example, they're all regulated monopolies. So the basis of democratically free capitalism are regulated monopolies. And that started us thinking about how the regulators should approach things. And we started talking to them. You should feel sorry for the regulators because they have a really tough time. If they get make one mistake, they could wipe out the entire economy, right? By being too free, they could destroy the concept of price discovery in markets, for example. And by being too tight, they could, as the former minister, Bima Falami, put it, the Minister for Regulation, amongst other things, said the UK is in danger of regulating the world's safest graveyard. And you have to agree with them there, because if you look at the performance of our stock exchanges, for example, the London Stock Exchange is in the deep dive, and last year the AIM market didn't even have one single IPO. There's something very broken about it here. So I wouldn't look for the regulators to be the ones to fix this problem. As a matter of fact, we talked to people in the new Labour government a couple of weeks ago about this, just informally. And they're looking at taking 10 years to study this project. And technologies don't last 10 years. As a matter of fact, I've written a 7-part program about how technologies always only last 14 years. I don't mean from the date they were invented till the date they go away. I mean the date that the public accepted them as the big new technology until it was replaced by something more interesting. Always happens. For some reason, we don't know why, every 14 years. And you can see that. Do you remember the market reaction to iPhone 15? Yawn, right? And the only reason we haven't had a replacement for that is simply because we spent 2 years in lockdown. But the industry will change. The other interesting thing is that blockchain happened 14 years ago when 2 pizzas were sold for, was it 10,000 Bitcoin. But blockchain, was pointed out, isn't yet accepted. It's still in the pre-acceptance stage. If you take, for example, television, the patent for television was issued to Philo T. Farnsworth, at the age of 14, by the way, in 1929. But television didn't become a consumer product item until 1953, when at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth was the first globally broadcast television event. Television sales took off from there. So we're not yet even at the start of the commercially accepted blockchain thing. And the other interesting thing is we hear from a meeting that's going to come up in Kazan in Russia later this month, where at the BRICS conference, where they're going to be discussing a communal blockchain structure for 86% of the world's population. That will obviously have an impact on what we on this tiny little island are doing. And the other thing is every single village, town, and city in China has been on a blockchain now for 9 years, I think. So we haven't yet reached the starting line of the industry that we're here to talk about. It will happen. It's the 14-year cycle has been disrupted. It was supposed to be 2003, but now it's going to be 2005 by the looks of it. But we're not yet there. So the way we should be looking at it here is this is not something that's happening locally and is going to be subject to UK regulations. You know, regulations are regulations. Do you think AI developers in Shenzhen are worried about what regulators in Brussels are saying? They're not in the slightest bit interested. I've introduced world standards before well, first was MS-DOS, and then we did Microsoft Windows. Nobody regulated that. You know, it was a de facto standard. And I think that's what we're going to be looking at in the future is whoever plays the best game is going to be the winner, and the regulators will follow.
So how do you think we can step up our efforts when it comes to education and improving the conversation around digital assets? Because you bring up some very important points there. And I think, you know, and as well, Marc, what you mentioned about, you know, we just throw a lot of terminology around and we lose a lot of people in this conversation. I think many people still feel like investing here is way more like gambling than it is like investing. And I don't think that anything is going to change until that feeling shifts. And so I'd be interested to hear from each of you where we can step up our efforts as far as education is concerned in order to be able to encourage broader adoption.
So in my opinion right now, we have education takes time. You know, coming to panels, we do, I think all of us, quite a few of them. Yesterday, I did a lecture for a business school, French business school, master's degree, and it takes time, it takes effort, and it doesn't necessarily yield, you know, any revenue for your company or anything. But it is super important. So the way to be better at it is making sure that we educate the right people, the decision makers, the ones who are going to incorporate the technology or going to work with it, who have to understand it. but trying to educate about blockchain, let's say an investor or someone who is going to use your product and doesn't need to know about blockchain. So I take my example with private debt. If I've got an SME company who needs to borrow money, like 2-3 million, because they've got, let's say, a cheese factory and they want to borrow this money to have a new store in town. Bank are not lending to them, private markets or giving them like insane interest rates, and they're not VC backable. Why would they care about my platform running on blockchain? What they want to know is like, what is the interest rate you're going to give me? Is it secured? Is it transparent? Can I have, how's the liquidity, etc.? That's what we have to focus on. So education is great, but we have to know who to educate and focus on the decision makers that are going to move the needle, rather than trying to educate everyone, including those who don't necessarily need to know about the underlying tech.
To follow up on what you said, more than just highlighting what we need to do is what we don't need to do. We're seeing a lot of educational programs at the moment that are way too vague, too general, not localized. We need to do all the opposite. We're seeing an ecosystem in Europe that is completely different than the one in the US, the one in APEC, the one in MENA. And if we do want to educate entrepreneurs entering the space, if we do want to give them the best chance to survive in this space, we do need to do more local approaches to all those programs. Binance specifically, we do have Binance Academy, and we do have this general program for all entrepreneurs jumping in the space. But one thing we do per region and per teams is just making sure that every entrepreneur we work with, we educate them on the local barriers and how to solve local issues. Why? Again, let's speak directly on the institutional side. If I'm helping an entrepreneur that wants to launch a hedge fund in the crypto space, it's not the same launching a hedge fund in the crypto space in Europe than in the US, than in MENA, than in APAC. Completely different in terms of compliance. And before they even go and run their strategies on the exchange, we need to educate them on, this is what you need to do to survive, to be scalable, to become compliant in front of the regulator. Because if they don't do that, then we have a legacy issue. And the 90% of hedge funds won't last if they don't solve that first roadblock. For instance, we have an issue currently that we have too many educational programs focusing on, and again, let's say in the institutional space, teaching you how to ramp up your operations in the crypto space, how to remove the friction. But at the end of the day, let's go back to the basic, to the base layer, which is how compliant your fund is in Europe. If you don't have that, you won't last. And what we have seen, or at least in my position, is a lot of entrepreneurs trying to jump in the institutional arena in crypto. They oversee the importance of having AML controls or transaction monitoring. And they say, Michela, why do we need, we're a hedge fund, why do we need to have an AML policy? You're going to have a lot of legacy issues in the future if you don't have complete AML controls from the start with all your investors. This, of course, differentiates, so goes miles away if you're facing retail or if you're facing institutional investor. But to the one point I wanted to make is we need to make those educational programs more localized, more specific, go back to the basic, go back to the main layer, which is compliance. And at the end of the day, that's how we're going to make those entrepreneurs long-lasting, and that's how we're going to be collaborating long-term with them. That's one side, and the second is just make sure instead of creating those programs that are too vague, start generating more specific frameworks for them. This is my 2 cents. Alan, what do you think?
I have to go back to, I was in the West Coast, USA, in the late 1970s when the personal computer was first created. And, I was at Microsoft. I was very good friends with the two Steves who started Apple. And we were always talking about it, you know, how do we do consumer education? How do we educate people about what is a personal computer and why would you want one, right? And I always laugh because, you know, the stock answer for somebody said, why would I need a computer, personal computer? And the answer was, well, you can balance your checkbook and you can store your recipes on it, right? And fast forward today, and you know, people ask, what can I do with blockchain? And the answer is the modern equivalent of, well, you can balance your checkbook and store your recipes on it, right? And it doesn't matter how much we try to educate people about the words. There's this thing that happens called the killer app, right? Every technology has one, and the technology doesn't really happen until the killer app happens. And right now in digital currencies and DeFi and blockchain and all these, we don't have that killer app yet. But when we did the personal computer, I remember inside the industry we were talking about when IBM introduced their PC in 1981, how this is a big event because we were moving from 8 bits to 16-bit computing. And nobody cared, right? So people started to realize the difference when they went to a computer shop and they saw an Apple and an IBM sitting next to each other, an 8-bit computer and a 16-bit computer. And I think I was a very clever boy because I made a program that ran on both so you could see the difference. It was called the Flight Simulator, the Microsoft Flight Simulator. And that's when Apple's sales started to plummet and IBM's sales started to go. So until we actually have something that is graphically visible that will change people's lives in a big way, not just tinkering around the edges here, we don't have to worry about education. People will educate themselves when they see it with their own eyes and they see the benefit of having it. And we're not there yet. It will happen though, and we'll all know it when it happens.
If I can just add something, I really like the killer app analogy here. And when I was in trading, so I was in investment banking, selling fixed income products, and then I got poached by this electronic and algorithmic trading venue, and they were like, okay, trading is going electronic now. So do you want to come with us and cover, you know, Europe, etc. So I jumped and went to the fintech side, and my role was to go to see those head of trading who had been trading fixed income on voice, picking up their phone, calling their counterparts to trade bonds for 20, 25, 30 years. And then I was going to see them, and I was like 25 at the time, and I was saying, hey, you have to start using algorithms and electronic trading venues. And they were like, what? Like, why would I do that, right? But then once they started seeing the benefits, but also regulators at some point asked to have best execution policy, meaning that you have to show that you traded at the best price. So regulators somehow helped the technology also to progress, because all of a sudden you had traders who had to show that they traded at this price because this was the best in the market. So how do you do that in an efficient way? You can't have 10 phone calls, because when you're a trader, you call your friend who's working in another bank to trade your bond. It's like, yes, this is the price of the bond, but hey, how's your kids and how's everything, you know? So you've got 10 calls like that, 1 hour per call, 30 minutes, you're wasting time, productivity, efficiency. You go electronic, you do a few clicks, you've got all those prices coming in. So regulation helps. And then we had COVID that came. And COVID, well, we had to, you know, review the way we were living, but also the way we were trading. So these boosted massively the adoption of electronic and algorithmic trading. So what is true for traditional finance, and to go back to your killer app, I think also at some point there will be something that can help with greater adoption, that there's a part of things that is outside of our control too, and we would have to embrace it, but we have to be ready by then.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time, and I'm sure we want to take a few questions. So I want to close with looking at some emerging technologies that you guys expect to see gain traction in 2024 and 25. And Alan, I would like you to take us 5 to 10 years into the future, because I know you're dying to, and everyone in this room is dying to hear what you've got in mind. So please.
Yeah, there's 10 years from now, there's two words that we won't use anymore, and this will scare people. We won't use the word digital. That will be gone. And we won't use the word electronic. That will be gone as well. Because one of the problems that we're all facing here is, for example, the design of blockchain is extremely inefficient. It's a brilliant idea, very, very, very difficult to execute, and does require a lot of computing power. So when the global sanction things happened a couple of years ago, and the Chinese got cut off from the ability to buy machines to make electronic chips, they said, okay, we won't use electrons anymore, we'll use photons. And they've created photonic processors that are 3,000 times faster than NVIDIA. But that's not what's important. The important thing is it uses 1/1,000,000th of the energy of NVIDIA. So that means that the processors in the future, in 10 years' time, we won't worry about the inefficiency of blockchain anymore. It'll be everywhere. It's easy to do. The computer processing will be there. The networking technology is the next one that needs to be upgraded. But the efficiency that is holding back modern blockchain and crypto asset, whatever, the entire sector here, the problems, the bottlenecks that are there are literally going to evaporate in the next couple of years. And the world will be your oyster.
One thing I'm quite excited, about is actually decentralized physical infrastructure networks. I think that it's a great way. I was talking about hybrid usage of blockchain. I think it's a great way of using blockchain in our day-to-day lives and getting shared ownership. So tomorrow, when you're gonna get, Uber, you can, let's say, sponsor Uber. You invest in the infrastructure in the car, and the more the driver is driving and doing trips, the more you earn also. And that's something that can be applied to so many industries. You go and grab a coffee, well, you've got a bit of revenue sharing because you support the company. You go and play golf, it's the same thing. So it's using the blockchain and integrating this into our lifestyle. And this is something that has a lot of potential thanks to Deepin, and we're, again, only scratching the surface here.
Two bets on this. The first is going to be more hybrid products. I think you have just described one of them. We're going to see more and more exchanges and venues out there combining the returns of a decentralized product with the structure and safety of a centralized one. We are seeing this movement in which will start offering more and more interesting products that at the end of the day offer the duality. And the second is, and again, we're already seeing this, but it will be massively expanded in the next few months, is a very smooth bridge between TradFi and crypto. The firm I work with, and similar with other players, we're already working on long-lasting partnerships with banks in which some of our big institutional clients will be able to use their banks of choice, the banks that they have been trusting for ages, to custody their assets but still trade one-on-one in our venues. And that's happening, and that will soon be expanding massively. And what this is doing is just offering accredited investors the possibility to, and TradFi investors the possibility of smoothly transitioning to a digital asset space. I would like to add a few more bets, but we're constraining time.
No, please do. Please do.
Okay.
You sure?
I like questions.
All right. Questions?
Any questions from the crowd? Just time for one. Literally one. And one. And
Where do you think the first app will come from? What sector?
The first killer app? Yeah. Where's the killer app coming from?
Well, that's why it's killer. You never really know where it's going to come from. I mean, everything, as I said earlier, when the personal computer what we're really talking about is what you know, keep your recipes, balance your checkbook. Well, these are paper applications, and you know, again, we're replacing paper applications with going from a traditional ledger to a distributed ledger, for example, which is, you know, you can't do that on. We're doing what we do on paper digitally, but then two friends of mine in Boston came up with this idea of doing a spreadsheet. Boom, that was a killer app. That was it. Nobody saw it coming, you know. I copied them and we did Excel and everything. Well, didn't copy them, we worked together on it. But that was the killer app that made people see, oh, I can do something electronically now that I can't do with paper. And we haven't seen that yet with blockchain. Blockchain is replicating how we work in traditional means, which is paper, but doing it electronically. And we don't have something yet that can only be done electronically. But whenever we do, that'll be it. And if one of you out there has got it, I'll be happy to put some money in your company. We look at, in China, by the way, it was Alibaba. Alibaba did something, you know, with everybody in the West and the internet, we were all doing B2C. They did B2B. And nobody had done that before in an electronic format. And that really changed the industry. Again, it'll just come from left field. You'll know it when you see it.
Lovely. Thank you very much to the panelists. Very, very interesting. Round of applause.